Let me know if you can see the slide that says mental health care system in the Netherlands. Yes? All right, that's what you see. All right. Good. So that's the topic of today. And we organize that as anti-loneliness, which is a mental health practice in the Netherlands. I am Vasya. I am the director, the clinical director, the founder of anti-loneliness. But together with me today, I'm not alone. I have 3 of the 15 members of my team, which is Zeynep, Megan, and Dina. And they're going to talk to you as well later. And we practice in different cities of the Netherlands. We have people, therapists in The Hague, in Leiden, in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, in Haarlem. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. No. Hello, Catherine from Eindhoven. Nice to see you. And every therapist in the team is practicing on their own expertise. One is for eating disorder, another one is for anxiety, depression, or actually most of us are specialized in anxiety disorders, group therapy, family therapy, couples therapy. But also we have therapists outside the Netherlands, which is in Greece, in Belgium, in Portugal, in Spain, and in Brazil. So that's why we also offer online therapy. So today, our topic, our goal actually is to simplify the Dutch mental health care system and see how we can how you can actually find the support, the help you really need and you really deserve. You're still seeing the presentation, right? Yes, okay, all right. Fantastic. And the topics, what we will cover today is how the Dutch healthcare system works, how to overcome some of the most common emotional challenges that expats face, but also the challenges facing that system, and what are some practical steps in order to get the support you need. It's going to be interactive, so I would love to hear your questions at the end of the session, but in between, of course, if you have some questions, please put them in the chat. But before I start with the overview of the Dutch mental health care system, I have a question for you. And actually, there's a tool here where I can share a poll with you. So here's a poll that you can see on your screen. What's your biggest challenge in navigating mental health care in the Netherlands? Is it finding the right provider? Is it long waiting lists? Is it cultural barriers? Is it understanding insurance? What's your challenge? And you can also vote for more than one. Renee says all 4. Yeah, I know. Absolutely. It is a struggle. It is a struggle. I mean, I'm still learning about the mental health care system in the Netherlands. So that says something already. All right. Fantastic. Now, let's see. Well, the majority of you said 80% understanding insurance. Absolutely, this is a tricky one. Then with 65% finding the right provider, and then the waiting list and the cultural barriers as well. All right, thank you very much for voting. That's really useful. Now, let's start with the Dutch mental health care system. The Dutch mental health care system uses a stepped care model, which means that it offers different levels of care depending on the severity of the issue. On the very first basic level, which doesn't even require a specialist, it's the anonymous e-health. Like, for example, you can call the 113 suicide prevention line if you think that you're about to harm yourself. There are also other emotional support helplines like the Stichting Correlatie, the listening line, the Luisterlijn, mind correlatie, social services. There's a hotline also, Veilig Huis, for domestic abuse. the self-help visor, which has, if I remember correctly, it has self-help tools, guides, and tips for managing various mental health issues such as stress, anxiety, depression. You can take some self-assessment quizzes there, and it can also have suggested steps to improve the mental health well-being. And also the Raison de Bol, which is free anonymous online therapy programs for individuals dealing with mental health challenges. Fatima asks a very useful question, which is, do they offer it both in English and in Dutch? For sure in Dutch. But for the English, you have to check some of them yes, some of them no. I know for sure that 113 Suicide Prevention, they also have people speaking English there, at least now. In the past, they had only Dutch. So some of them, they might offer their services in English. But of course, that's the thing, the tricky thing, that the majority of these services are in Dutch for the Dutch population. Now we go to the second, let's say the primary mental health care. And this is the basis zorg, the basic, which is suitable for mild to moderate conditions. And that can be judged by the symptoms that you might be facing, the duration of these symptoms, the frequency or the severity of these symptoms. And it can be like anxiety, or it can be mild depression. And when somebody receives primary mental health care, that involves up to 750 minutes of treatment. And that can be around 10 to 12 sessions of treatment. On the second level, the next level is the secondary, the specialized mental health care. The basic can be provided by the GP, but not only. The basic can also be by a basispsycholoog, for example, that can offer that treatment. Or it can be provided by the GP. Thank you, Jakub, for the question. So it can be both. The secondary is for more complex, more severe conditions, the ones that require longer term treatment. And that can be maybe severe depression. That can be personality disorders. That can be PTSD, ADHD, PTSD, in case you don't know, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, the attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, autism, or any disorder in the autism spectrum, or schizophrenia, as I said already. So that treatment not only is more complex and can last longer, maybe over a year, but often involves multidisciplinary approach. Maybe not only one therapist or one specialist might be required for these cases. So and that's also why it's called specialized. So how do we navigate it? What is the first thing that we need to do? First of all, you can have an appointment with your GP. The GP, we need that appointment not only for the referral, but also because maybe sometimes we don't even know what we're struggling with. We don't even know all these symptoms that we are experiencing. What is that? Is that even a disorder? Is that something that requires treatment? Is that normal? So this is where they will ask you some questions. Maybe you will need to fill in a questionnaire or an assessment. And possibly you will get a diagnosis based on DSM-5. This is the diagnostic manual that we use for mental health diagnosis. If needed, because there are also conditions in life that they don't fall into the diagnostic manual. For example, if you're facing problems with your partner, that's not a mental health disorder. You don't need a diagnosis for that. If you're grieving because of the loss of a loved one, also that doesn't need a diagnosis. I will talk about the insurance in a moment, Healy. Thank you very much for the question. Is basic treatments free or insured if recommended by the GP? So that's the advantage of having a referral. You can get the insurance coverage. If it's a complex case, because remember that your GP, your general practitioner, is not a psychologist. They might have knowledge of some psychological conditions, but they're not a psychologist. So maybe they will give you a diagnosis, or maybe they will refer you to another specialist, or maybe they will refer you to what they call the praktijk assistant, the practice assistants that can have up to 4 sessions with you in order to figure out what might be the next step. So all these are very adjusted to each person individually. If the doctor cannot figure it out, or it's not within their area of expertise, they might refer you either to the praktijk assistant or to another specialist. Now, alternatively, what also we don't know is that we can go to a psychologist, and they, with their now expertise, because they have studied psychology, not medicine, they can tell you more specifically what you're experiencing, whether you need treatment for a specific disorder or not. So maybe you can have an even more specialized and professional diagnosis based on your symptoms. It doesn't mean that you don't need a referral or you cannot get a referral, but it's just having a second opinion by a specialist, which is really useful. It's sometimes even more useful than the GP's opinion that has only their medicine degree. And still, with this diagnosis that you can get from a psychologist, you can go back to your GP having more certainty about your symptoms and having more, being more assertive about what you want to achieve from this meeting with your GP. Now, the next thing that can happen is that your GP will give you, as I said before, the diagnosis, and they will give you also a referral to a psychologist. Usually the referral will be for a psychologist, for a therapist, a professional, from their list. And this list is a list with contracted providers, professionals that have a contract with insurance, or they have what we call the BIG registration. They are within the Dutch healthcare system. Your GP has access to this list, and based on the symptoms that they saw from you, they're going to look for somebody maybe in your area, preferably in your area, that can help you and give you the care you are in need for during this period. But sometimes they don't have access to all the other providers which are outside of this list. And outside of this list, there are many also psychologists. And it doesn't need to be only psychologists that they're coming from another country. It can also be that psychologists that they don't want to work with insurances. They have chosen to not have a contract with a specific insurance company and work with insurances. They decided that they want to work only on private pay. So that's a list that usually the GP doesn't have access to. That's why sometimes we need to do some research beforehand and see what are the specialists in our area, what are the people that can help us. And if we go to our GP and say, you know what, I've checked and I have seen that Zainab can actually help me with what I'm struggling for. Can you make a referral for Zainab? Can you write her name? And that's okay. That's something we don't know. The referral doesn't need to be only for the specialist that your GP thinks that is a good fit for you. You can go with a suggestion and you can say, I would like to work with this specialist. Can you please write the referral for that person? If it's a more complex case and it's not so easy for, of course, the GP to make a diagnosis or you're not going to go directly to the person who will treat you. Your GP will refer you to somebody who can make the diagnosis first. And this person, after the diagnosis, will refer you to the specialist that can offer the specialized treatment. And of course, as you can understand, this process can take from months to year. I have had a client that at some point she decided that because she wanted to work on a specific symptom, that it was not on my area of expertise, and she decided to go through the Dutch healthcare system. Then she was waiting for 4 months to get an appointment. This appointment was only for the diagnosis. After the diagnosis, she was waiting for another 3 months, and eventually she was really tired of waiting. She called the clinic, and they even told her that they had some meetings for her case in order to figure out what would be the specialist that can take and treat her. And all this was already billed through her insurance, even though you don't have an appointment already. Just because this team is meeting for you, this is already sending invoices to your insurance. And of course, not to mention that she started receiving treatment 9 months after she applied for this appointment. So you can see how this can take really long time sometimes. And of course, sometimes it can be really fast. Johan says, can you get care without a diagnosis? Yes, absolutely. You can start working with any therapist you want, even this week. The only reason we usually go through the referral is in order to get a diagnosis, to understand what's going on with us, so that we can have a more specific idea of what it is that we're seeking treatment for, and or to be reimbursed because we will have that referral. If none of this applies to you, if you know already that I struggle with anxiety, I don't need to get reimbursed, or I will get reimbursed in a different way, and I will talk about that later, you can already find a therapist tonight, book an appointment, as you can find their contact information on the website, and you can start working with them immediately this week. The waiting time is usually for more complex cases, or if you don't know how to take the next step. Lola says, do I still need to go see a GP to get a diagnosis and a referral if I already got a diagnosis in my home country before coming to the Netherlands? I think this is the same thing that I just said just right now. Like, you need the GP if you don't have a diagnosis, and if you need to be reimbursed, because you need the referral for the reimbursement. If you don't need these two, the reimbursement or the diagnosis, you can start already by contacting somebody and start working with them. Do insurance companies limit the number of sessions? Yes, that's the next thing I'm going to cover. Yes, they have a specific amount of sessions that they reimburse, and sometimes some insurance companies even a specific amount that they reimburse, financially a specific amount. Like, for example, they say I reimburse a session up to 100 euros. And if your therapist charges 150, for example, then the extra 50 will go from your pocket. So let's go to the insurance coverage. In order for the insurance to cover, they need a mental health issue that is classified as a DSM-5 disorder. DSM, as I said, is a diagnostic manual, psychological. So that means that certain conditions, such as maybe adjustment disorders or couples therapy or grief counseling, maybe not be fully covered unless it's accompanied by other conditions like depression or anxiety. So in that case, maybe your psychologist will write a report for the insurance company. Well, they will actually state maybe only the anxiety or the depression part and not the rest of the part, because the rest of the part is not relatable and it's not reimbursed by the insurance. So that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. If it's a mental health issue classified by the DSM-5 disorder, DSM-5, then it can be reimbursed. All the rest No. Another thing is the acute condition versus the chronic condition. Acute symptoms are treated within a limited number of sessions. This is what we said before. Like, if it takes up to 750 minutes, yes, insurance companies, they will cover it. If it's, and this is handled by the primary care, the basic care, as we said. And the chronic might need the multidisciplinary team. The acute issues, they have lower costs and they're covered by the basic insurance, while the chronic conditions might include some higher costs and might not be covered by the basic insurance. Now, that's the thing now about the acute and the chronic. In order for the insurance, maybe some insurance companies cover chronic conditions, maybe, not all of them. But still, they will need a reporting from your psychologist. How is it going? Is it getting better? Why is it not getting better? Why this chronic condition does not have any change? And if an acute condition or what was presented as an acute symptom turns into chronic, also the insurance company may choose to stop reimbursing in that case. So you see, the insurance company, that's important. That's an important information for the insurances. Now, the basic coverage is typically covers care from contracted providers, as we said before. The additional insurance, I don't know if you have that in your package, your insurance package. It's what it's called the Entfullende Verzekering. It's the basic and the Entfullende Verzekering. This is where you can get reimbursed for what they call as alternative treatments. For example, maybe you will do homeopathy, or maybe you will do acupuncturing, or maybe you will take some alternative medication. Maybe you will try coaching or mindfulness, or maybe there are some extended therapy sessions that can be covered via the Entfullende insurance. But that's something that it's really different from one package, from one company to another. You have to check with your insurance what is covered there. If your therapy sessions are covered from the Entfullende insurance, your therapist or the specialist that sees you needs to be registered in an association, as we call the Vereniging. They need to be registered there in an association. They also need to have an AGB code, and also non-contracted private therapists, they can also fall into the additional insurance. Also, not forget that there is the Eigenrisiko, this 385 euros, at least the amount that we pay now in 2024, that always get out of your pocket. So this amount will get from your pocket either way. And the fact that your therapist is contracted with insurance company doesn't necessarily mean that it's contracted with your insurance company. That's something that you need to check. So if, for example, you have a contract with Silver and Kraus, and you get referred by your GP to a psychologist who can get reimbursed, you have to check with them whether they have a contract with Silver and Kraus. So each insurance company has their own contracted providers and their own amount of sessions and their own amount of fees that they cover. And that's something that your psychologist doesn't know. You have to check with your insurance company. Now, what are the requirements now for the psychologist? That's not something for you to remember, but just keep in mind. The psychologist, as I said before, in order to be reimbursed, the sessions to be reimbursed, they have to be registered, BIG registered, which is the certification for a professional on the mental health, on the healthcare qualifications in the Netherlands. They need to have an AGB code. That's something that if you are sending the invoice to the insurance company, you also need to ask from your psychologist, from your therapist, maybe even before you get the invoice, so that you can check with your insurance company. The AGB code is just a unique identifier for healthcare professionals and organizations, which is required for the billing. And of course, they need to write reports and mention on the invoices what are the psychological disorders that they are treating you for, listed, of course, in the DSM-5. Another important aspect that we need to know is the confidentiality and reporting. As I said before, in order for the insurance company to cover the costs of therapy, they need to get a report from your psychologist, which means that some information from you will be shared. Not private information, at least I hope so. I hope that the therapist will not share that. They will not share any sensitive details or any session notes. What the insurance company needs to know is the type of treatment, the diagnostic code, and the duration of the treatment. That's what they need to know. And of course, if we're talking about chronic conditions, they will also ask for ongoing reporting. And again, if we're talking about chronic conditions. In any case, they need to ask from your consent to share information. The psychologist need to say, can I share this information with the insurance provider? Something that I haven't faced very often, but I have encountered that, is that because I work with a lot of internationals, and there are some people that they're working on positions that any, any information regarding their mental health will have consequences on their job. Like, for example, I've worked with people that they work in secret services. And in there, when they see that there's a mental health condition or report or appointment in your file, in your folder, in your BSN number, then that affects whether you can keep working for them. So in some positions, some job positions, this might actually hinder your career or your professional growth. So sometimes we don't want to go through the original or the let's say the official route, because we don't want to have this stigma on our file. That's also something for you to know, because this information will be shared with your mental health, with your health provider. As I said, it's not very often, but it depends where you work. Now, how can we have access? How can we access care without waiting for months? As I said before, many psychologists and mental health professionals, especially expert psychologists, they choose to not be contracted with insurance companies. They don't want to work there. Sometimes it's practical reasons, like we have studied in a different country, we have been trained in a different country, we have been licensed in a different country, which means that if, as a psychologist, I come to the Netherlands, it's not easy to get into the Dutch healthcare system. I have to do another 3 to 5 years of studies in Dutch so that I can have the big registration, as we said before. And there are many expert psychologists that they choose not to do that for practical reasons, because they have done already their studies and they want to focus on working on their profession rather than doing the same study, but now in Dutch. Also, I've met a lot of psychologists and also healthcare professionals, not only psychologists, that they choose not to be contracted and work with insurance companies, again, because of the bureaucracy of the system, because they have to write a lot of reports, because they have to share sensitive information, because they have to also limit their sessions in a specific amount of sessions. Sometimes we do work that takes more than 6 sessions or 10 sessions, which are insured by the company, by the insurance company, and we don't want to be limited by that. So many reasons why many psychologists, local and expert psychologists, choose to not be contracted. So keep that in mind. It's not illegal. It's not something unofficial if you choose to work with somebody outside of the Dutch healthcare system. Choose to say the therapist you feel that is a good match for you, and you can ask your GP to write a referral for this professional. As I said before, you don't need to go to the GP and the GP tells you who you can work with. It can go the other way around. You can have a really quick or I don't know, as deep as you want, search and find somebody who works in the same area with you on the and has the expertise that actually meets your need. And you can go with that recommendation to your therapist and say, can you please write a referral for that specialist? And maybe that specialist also doesn't have a long waiting list. You don't need to wait. Keep in mind that those that they are contracted, they have longer waiting lists because, of course, the GP sent everybody to these. The most important thing is that you remember your mental health is the most important thing. I had a client many years ago that she was coming from Groningen in Leiden because her GP referred her to a psychologist that had a 3-month waiting list. And you might say, well, 3 months, it's okay. It's not that bad. Well, actually, she was in a severe depression with suicidal thoughts. And she said to me, 3 months for me is like an eternity. I don't know whether I'm going to make it for 3 months. I really feel that I'm on the verge of starting harming myself. So I want to get help now. And because she found anti-loneliness, she was coming every Sunday because no other day could actually fit for her to travel for 3 hours to Leiden and 3 hours back to Groningen. She was coming on Sunday to meet with me so that she can actually make sure that she will protect herself and her mental health. And unfortunately, it worked. It worked really well. So your mental health above all. I also have this comment there, if you are a business owner, and that's a trick that I also learned very recently. The traditional way to get reimbursed, of course, as we discussed, is that you get a referral and then your psychologist will send all the invoices to the insurance company and they will be covered, whatever the amount of sessions and fees that the insurance company pays. But also, if you're a business owner, you can actually ask you can also declare all the expenses for therapy at the end of the year, and you can get a deductible amount back from the therapy sessions if you're a business owner, and then explaining that these are costs that you need, of course, for your business or for being in good mental state to run your business. So that's another thing that you can also see whether you can have that if you own a business. Now, how to find the right therapist for expats. Now, first we need to see what are some common challenges that internationals face and why we need to do that, because a local therapist has experience maybe from the mental health condition that they have received training for, but there's something specific in the challenges and the mental health struggles that an expat or an international is facing, that only if you have had this experience, you can actually provide care and support for that. So what are these common challenges? And I would like to ask my colleague, Megan, can you please enlighten us a little bit about what are the challenges that we are facing?
Okay, so there are actually many challenges that internationals or expat face when they start therapy in a new country. And the first one I want to talk about is cultural barriers. This can really be noticed when your therapist is unfamiliar with your cultural background or international experience, or even just not open to understanding it. Sometimes therapists don't understand the importance certain cultural values or practices have, which can lead them to misinterpreting the issues that you face. And these cultural differences can be related to family dynamics or family expectations or value systems, emotional expressions, or even just a difference in communication styles. And when a therapist has little to no experience with international clients, they may lead you to feel more misunderstood or leave you to feel more isolated as a whole, leaving you maybe even frustrated in your sessions. For example, a client of mine who had just switched from a Dutch therapist to me felt very misunderstood when speaking about their family issues. The therapist was making suggestions of very harsh boundary settings as if it was easy for the client, when in actuality, that harsh boundary setting is very, very frowned upon in their culture. And it left them feeling very, very confused in themselves and their abilities. And it also impacted the relationship that they had with their therapist. And it left them feeling more isolated in their issues. Another important aspect is this sense of loneliness and homesickness that's different to the experience of locals. There's this increased feeling of loneliness and homesickness that's not uncommon with expats. Being so far away from your family and friends and being in an unfamiliar environment can really, really highlight these feelings. Also, being that far away from close family and friends can mean that you lack a support system close to you. People miss the ability to have spontaneous interactions like a last-minute coffee date or a last-minute unplanned dinner. And those social connections are very crucial for emotional support. To lose them so suddenly can make someone really feel that profound sense of loneliness. It's also important to note that building a new support system for expats is really not easy and that it takes time. And there are language barriers and cultural differences that make that experience even harder or make that ability to develop that support system even more difficult. Having that support system really impacts our mental health, and it's very easy for an expat to notice when this is gone. Many internationals also struggle with an existential crisis, and this comes from constantly starting over in new environments, new beginnings. One can easily start to question their sense of belonging or purpose or identity, especially when your sense of home is very fragmented. With every move, an expat sometimes have to redefine parts of their identity. And it's understandable that they can feel like they're losing a sense of self when they have to adapt to new cultures and ways of living that makes them start questioning their values and their goals. Another important thing to highlight is the transient nature of expat life. So the life of an expat can be very, very short-term and unpredictable, and that there's kind of this sense of awareness of an impermanence towards their living situation. One of the most heartbreaking things about expat life is having to say goodbye. Internationals form close bonds with other internationals only to watch them leave after a few years or only having to say goodbye to them themselves. And that constant cycle of making friends and saying goodbye is really emotionally exhausting and can really make someone reluctant to form these deep relationships. And even if someone does manage to get over that hurdle and create these deep relationships, for an expat who's frequently on the move, that thought of starting over again is really emotionally exhausting and mentally draining. And this fear of not putting roots down can leave someone feeling in such limbo, never really truly settled anywhere. There's also a feeling of outsider syndrome. Even after years of living in a country, an international can still feel like they never truly belong, whether it's because of language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, or just simply feeling like they're different. And that feeling of being an outsider is really emotionally draining. Sometimes internationals can even feel that pressure to adapt to their new culture, whilst feeling kind of guilty or losing their identity when they're drifting away from their home culture. And this conflict can really create that feeling of emotional tension. And the last one I want to talk about is that uncertainty of the future. It's that really big question, should I stay or should I go? And that uncertainty of staying in this country, moving to a new country, or going back to my home country can be very, very overwhelming. And it can make someone feel that sense of instability. When you weigh all the pros and cons of each choice, staying or moving to a new country or going back home, it's easy for you to feel emotionally torn between two or even three different worlds, and none of which really fully feel like home. So all in all, expats or internationals experience many different challenges, whether it comes from loneliness or outsider syndrome or cultural differences or even an existential crisis. It's just important to note, though, that though these struggles are common, they're not unbeatable. And therapy with a culturally sensitive and experienced professional can really give the support internationals need to navigate through those emotional hurdles.
Yeah, it's sometimes it can be really, as you said, existential. Like I don't know what kind of person I want to be. I don't know what kind of values uh, feel more of a good fit for me. I remember many years ago I met a woman that she was already living for 10 years in the Netherlands. And when I visited her, not a client, just an acquaintance, um, she still had boxes in her house. And when I said, "Do you still have boxes?" And then she said, "Yeah, maybe I will leave. I will go back to my home country one day." So exactly that limbo that you said, like, will I stay or will I go? And that even impacted her relationships. She told me that she met a person that she really liked, and maybe there was a potential of a relationship. And still that fear, but what if I leave this country? Do I want to start a relationship in this one? That is that is a challenge. That is a question, an existential question that an expert can understand only if they have the expert experience from their own perspective. So thank you very much, Megan, for sharing that. Um, so what do we mean with culturally sensitive therapies? That's something that Megan mentioned, and I want to have your perspective on that, Zainab.
So Megan, I think, talked about these unique challenges many expats face and also mentioned cultural sensitivity. So I think it's a good idea to talk a little bit about what to look for in a therapist when you're looking for mental health care as an expat. And the first thing that really shows up, it's of course the cultural sensitivity and awareness. Look for a therapist who has experience in working with expats or international clients, because then they will be intimately familiar with these unique challenges Megan mentioned, like the cultural adjustment, the cultural shock you experience when you move to this foreign new country, and the homesickness, and of course, this sense of isolation, maybe identity related crises or issues. So it's very important to have a therapist also who has had a multicultural approach or had a cross-cultural psychology like education, because then they will be better equipped to handle these culture nuances, such as the communication styles or social norms and values. For example, if you think of a person who's coming from a collectivistic culture, moving to an individualistic mindset or culture, it would be a bit of a challenge, a unique challenge for this person to adjust, maybe in the at their job or in their new relationships. And the therapist can really, if they have the multicultural training, they can capture that and they can help effectively with those unique challenges. And also, it is quite common to experience this third culture kid, as they call it. But what it means is that there is this first culture that is the home culture where you're kind of coming from. Then we have the second culture, which is the host culture, so the culture of the country you're moving to. And then as an expat, you might be kind of left in the middle with this intersection of these two cultures. And if you're experiencing this, it's important to find a therapist who understands these challenges. For example, I had a client who struggled with that exactly because she moved a lot and she had a difficulty establishing this sense of belonging. She didn't know where she belonged, which culture, and it really affected her identity. So we really explored their unique identity, what that intersection meant for her. And that's very important to look for in a therapist. And of course, the second most important thing I would say, it's the language proficiency. So make sure that your therapist speaks your language fluently, or at least has a strong proficiency in the language you feel comfortable having therapy in. This will definitely facilitate open communication and building connection with your therapist. a client whose native language is Turkish might find it difficult to deeply open up and talk about these personal issues in English, for example. And also, of course, this comes down to this little nuances languages have. So if a therapist is able to understand the nuances of language, and you will notice some emotions, specific experiences and concepts do not really translate exactly in a different language. It might be hard to find this word or really get it across. And for example, homesickness and nostalgia can seem very similar, but in different languages, there might be different ways of expressing that. So if your therapist is sensitive to that, then they will help you bridge this gap between two languages. And also, it's important that your therapist is experienced with expat specific issues such as, homesickness and loneliness. If they're familiar with that, they can provide tailored, very individual coping strategies for you, such as maybe connecting with local expat communities or engaging in activities that remind you of home. So it's important that they are aware of these issues. Also, career and work-life balance, a big topic in an expat's life usually, because it can be a source of stress due to this big career transition maybe, or work permits. It's often that when you move to a new country, you get a permit to work there, and maybe you rely on your work giver or the government to keep this permit. So this can cause the sense of instability and insecurity in a way. So a therapist familiar with these concepts can offer strategies to deal with these transitions. And also expats, if you move with a partner or with a family, because everyone has their own pace of adjusting or own way of adjusting to their new lives, this can create some, tension within the family or changes in the dynamic. So it's important that your therapist is able to relate to that. So maybe a family or couples therapist is equipped to help you facilitate that communication within the family or the relationship to avoid the strain that might be caused on the relationship. And of course, we live in a digital era now, so it's quite common to have online or online therapy. And as expats, you might be, or internationals, you might frequently travel, go back to your home country, or travel for work or work remotely. So it's important to maybe look for therapists who offer online sessions. And in therapy, it's important to maintain these weekly or bi-weekly, regular sessions. And if your therapist offers online sessions, then you will be able to do these sessions wherever you are and whatever your schedule is. And when I talk about schedules, also, it is possible that expats work across multiple time zones. So maybe, you live in the Netherlands, but you manage a team in United States. So then you have a completely different working time or schedule. And you might benefit from therapists who offers more flexible scheduling to accommodate to your different working hours. And of course, why we kind of, what Vasia talked about, the insurance. So if a therapist is familiar with the international insurance coverage, they can guide you through this reimbursement process, alleviating the stress of another unfamiliar system. So less stress for you because they will be more informed and they can guide you through that. And if your insurance doesn't cover therapy, you can confirm whether your therapist offers flexible payment plans, or some people offer like lower rates for long-term clients, or even I think it's called like sliding scales for based on your financial situation or income. And of course, confidentiality, it's very important, GDPR, and it can differ between countries. So it's important to know if your therapist really understands and follow these regulations. So if you're moving from United States, you might not know how your data is protected or used. So a knowledgeable therapist will inform you, explain to you how the confidentiality laws apply across borders, which will give you a sense of security. And last but not least, of course, the license and credentials. Make sure the therapist you find is licensed and registered in the country where they practice or where they offer the online therapy from. So in the Netherlands, if you want the reimbursement, for example, the therapists need to be BIC registered to ensure that they meet the qualifications of the national standards. But all in all, these are some of the tips we can share. If you focus on these key elements, it will be easier to find a therapist who truly understands your unique situation as an expat or an international. And the right therapist will help you feel supported no matter where you are in the world.
I like what you said about the online sessions, that they offer online sessions. And what I wanted to add there is not only about the offering online sessions, but being comfortable in creating connection through the online sessions, because sometimes, many people can offer online sessions, but you will also find therapists that they say, I don't feel comfortable there. I cannot create connection via the online sessions. So you need somebody who has experience in creating that sense of safety and trust and connection, even through the digital world, as you said. Thank you very much, Zeynep. Very enlightening. So these are some questions that you can even ask your therapist. This is also during the first sessions. It's for both of you to see whether you can work together. You can ask them whether they have experience working with international or expat clients. Maybe they are Dutch, but you need to know whether they have worked before with international or expat clients. You can ask what is their therapeutic approach and how is it tailored to their needs or to different clients. You can also ask them how to make sure that we will not have any language misunderstandings in the sessions. You need to really have somebody who knows at least to speak very good English, if this is the language that you speak here in the Netherlands, or as Zeynep said, your own language. Of course, asking the questions about insurance, whether they offer online session, how they can ensure confidentiality and privacy, what will be the information that they will share with the insurance company. You can also ask them about their credentials, how long they have been practicing, what is their experience with clients dealing with your specific issue. You want to know whether they're experts on your issue and they can help you. So feel free to ask these questions. It's not like your doctor said, work with this person and you don't have any other option. You have plenty of options. Last but not least, you can always change therapist if the therapist that you're working with now doesn't really help you move the needle or progress, as we say more simply. So I would like to ask Dina, the therapist in our team, so that she can tell us a little bit what to do, or what are actually some signs that it doesn't work with a specific therapist and maybe we need to change.
Yeah, so if you notice that maybe some things are just not going well or it doesn't feel right, um, don't be afraid to change therapists. And I would like to talk about a couple of signs to maybe pay attention to kind of check in with yourself, whether or not it's the right idea for you to look for something else, for someone else. So first sign to pay attention to would be the lack of connection or rapport. Um, so in therapy, the therapeutic relationship between therapist and client is one of the most important predictors of the success of therapy. So it's really important that you feel understood, you feel safe with them, and if you find yourself frequently feeling misunderstood, or you feel like the therapist perhaps doesn't empathize or listen, that's not a good sign. So therapy space should always feel comfortable and safe space. Another sign to pay attention to is actually how comfortable you feel sharing. If you don't feel safe, or if you find yourself holding back on some information that is weighing on you, that can really hold back your progress. Therapy should be a space where you feel free to talk about anything without any hesitation. Another point maybe to mention, it was already mentioned, but to maybe also elaborate a bit more on, is the cultural disconnect. Besides the language barrier, and when you are just simply not able to express yourself due to missing words, or as Zaina pointed, with just small nuances, there is also element of just wanting to speak to therapists who understands your cultural background, who really understands the background you're coming from, but also the specific challenges that now as an expat international you have in this new environment. And if you are dealing with someone who cannot really grasp how these challenges can impact or are impacting your mental health, that can really add to additional feeling of isolation and loneliness in a new country. So it's really important to find someone who fully grasps this cultural background and being an expat in a new country. Sometimes it can also be a matter of therapeutic approach not working. We have over 250 modalities, and not everything works for everyone. So therapy is very individualistic, meaning there is no one size fit all. So sometimes it's really important to just recognize whether or not the therapist you are seeing has the right approach for you. Some people, for example, prefer more to work with their body. Some people are not really comfortable using that approach, so they would like to maybe talk more about their issue or have better cognitive understanding of what they're dealing with. But regardless of the modality, if you feel that the therapist is using an approach that is perhaps a bit too inflexible or rigid, that's not a good sign, because regardless of the modality, it should be tailored to your specific needs and goals that you want to achieve in therapy. Another thing to pay attention to is the progress. So if you notice that you've been spending some time already in therapy, you've been seeing therapists for a while, but you don't notice that there is any change, perhaps you should already notice after a while that however small, there is some change or improvement in yourself. So then this is also something to pay attention to and address with your therapist. The next point to pay attention to is related to boundaries and overstepping boundaries from therapist side. So it's definitely not a good sign if your therapist is oftentimes late, or they keep canceling, or maybe they ask inappropriate questions, questions that are not related to therapy, that are very personal and have little to do with things that you are working on in therapy sessions. Therapy is one place where you should always feel safe. So if that's not the case, that's really a sign that maybe it's not the right fit for you. Another important thing is that is related to goals. So there should always be shared understanding between therapists and clients. What are the goals you're trying to achieve? So if you feel that your goals are not taken seriously, or maybe therapist is pushing their own agenda or what they think would be a good goal for you, that's definitely a sign that that you want to look more into. There should always be teamwork and working towards the goals that are important for you and that you collaboratively agreed on. Another important sign is how you actually feel in therapy sessions. So as I already mentioned, therapy should always feel like a safe space and place where you shouldn't feel judged, regardless of what it is that you are sharing. So if you feel at times criticized or invalidated, or even ashamed by the reaction that maybe you receive from your therapist when you share something personal, that's not a good sign. So you should always feel validated and safe in your therapy space with your therapist. And then, yeah, the last point to sort of finish this list of the signs to look for is the expertise. So ideally, you do want to work with therapists that has an expertise in that exact problem that you're struggling with. And as Vasya already pointed before, it's really, I think any good therapist would be happy to share their expertise, their education. So if you have any concern, or maybe not even concern, but you simply want to know if they have experience, you should feel comfortable to share with your therapist your curiosity about the experience you have, the experience they have with your specific issue, and you shouldn't feel uncomfortable to ask for this information. So all in all, these are the signs to pay attention to, and I would really encourage that no matter what the sign that maybe you recognize with your therapist, to first discuss it with them. A lot of the times, if you bring some of the issues, it can be resolved through communication, and sometimes cannot. And then in that case, it's good to take those signs that you feel seriously and simply look for a better match.
Thank you so much, Tina. I mean, the last part that he said is really so important. The therapeutic relationship is the one that will facilitate that change, or will enable that change that we want to bring in our lives. And it's really so important that we feel safe to discuss anything with our psychologist, even something that is about them, about their approach, about the way they make us feel. So that's really important. Thank you very much, Tina. We are wrapping it up. We are closing. I know we are a little bit over time, but it's the last part. So we want to really make simple the way that we navigate it. And these are some practical steps that you can take. If you want to reach out to a psychologist, first of all, identify your mental health concern or goal. What is it that you want support for, if you know, if you can give it a name. Do some online research for specialists in your area or professional with expertise on your needs. Have an idea, just a rough idea. Of course, now we also have ChatGPT. You can just ask ChatGPT, these are my symptoms. What do you think? You can always take an opinion from Google search or ChatGPT. But that's just an opinion, so that you can come prepared for your meeting with your GP. Decide also whether insurance coverage is important for you, whether it's impossible for you to finance your sessions, or whether you would also be able to pay from your own pocket. And then reach out to your GP or a private provider so that you can get a diagnosis or an opinion about your situation. Plan the first session with your professional and see if they're a good fit. Ask these questions that we said before. If you want to be reimbursed, ask their AGB code if they are not sending the invoices directly to the insurance company, and just start therapy. So it's really simple what you need to know before meeting the GP or a psychologist, what you need to know, what you can ask, what it is that you can expect, what it is that you can also ask your insurance company, what your insurance contract says and covers. You can also find it there. And then start therapy as soon as possible, as soon as you need it. Now, we've talked a little bit about you can look for an expert in your area. There are many expert psychologists that they can help you. But of course, we are also doing the same job. Of course, you can book a free call with Anti-Loneliness. Don't use this phone. It doesn't work anymore. It's just a picture. You can just take a picture with your phone into this QR code, and you can book a free call with me, no obligation. You can ask personal questions. You can ask what kind of specialist would be a good fit for you. We can discuss about a plan together. That's the free call that you can have, and I call it the perfect fit call. We're going to find what is the perfect fit for you, for your needs. And in Anti-Loneliness, as I said before, there are psychologists that they are experts on anxiety, depression, eating disorders, trauma, burnout, grief, addictions, loneliness, expat life. Our psychologists, they come from all over the world. We have people from Croatia, from Greece, from Turkey, from the UK, from also Dutch, from South Africa, from, help me, Zeynep, what am I forgetting? From Brazil, from Philippines. What else am I forgetting? Yes, I think I've mentioned it, but
I think you had it all.
okay, I got it. Good. I don't want anybody to complain. And of course, we focus more on the quality and providing evidence-based approaches and support for you so that you can actually see the change in your life and you feel better. And of course, we're providing in-person and online sessions. And it's an important part of our process that we find the perfect fit for you. We match you with a therapist that has not only the expertise on your own situation, but also that matches with the date that you prefer, with the time that you prefer, the language that you feel more comfortable with. So that's important that we find the perfect fit for you. So if you want to have a perfect fit call, you can take a photo of this QR code and you can book a call, 15 minutes, and so that we can just discover what's the next step for you. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we will be here for the next 5 minutes if you want to ask, and we would be happy to discuss that. Meanwhile, please let me know in the chat, what was the most eye-opening thing that you heard today? What was something that you didn't know? What is something that you learned, and you're going to put it into action? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, Renee, I didn't know that you could ask for a specific referral. Absolutely, yeah.
Could I add maybe, Vasia, an experience I had, because you said that you can maybe claim back with your own business.
Yeah.
I found out, I think it was last year, on your tax return, if you have a Dutch tax return and you have out-of-pocket expenses and you're an individual without a business,
Yes,
then
true.
you can also claim back on your tax return out-of-pocket expenses. And what's really cool that I didn't know and just did this like a few months ago, I had my treatment a few years ago and was quite a few thousand out of pocket. And then I could redo my tax return for that year and still claim it back a few years later.
Absolutely.
So maybe a good thing to share as well if people aren't aware of that. You don't get the whole amount back, but you get part of it.
Yes, exactly. That's also something that I forgot to mention. Not only if you're a business owner, but generally as an individual, as a citizen, you can declare it at your annual income tax. Thank you so much, Renee, for sharing that.
No problem. You learn the hard way and then you share it with everybody else, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you can, as you said, you can also declare it, I don't know how many years, maybe 2 or 3 years later, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think for me it was 2 years later.
3 years, yeah.
And I think for me, like I was like something like 5,000 out of pocket, and I think I ended up getting at least 1,500 back. So I was quite pleased with that because I didn't know that I could get any back. So it was quite a nice bonus.
Exactly, fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah. Today, says Jacob, I learned how really Dutch insurance works. Yeah. That was tricky, right? Yeah. Thank you very much, Stefana, for the informative session. I will for sure start with checking details on my insurance. Yes, absolutely. Really useful, Sandra. Thank you very much for sharing that. The use of a business to claim back, says Catherine. Yes, absolutely. Lovely. So thank you all for being here, for spending your Tuesday evening with us. I think this was an important conversation pending to happen. Many people have misunderstandings about how the system works, but definitely you can get the support you need and deserve. Definitely that's out there for you waiting. So thank you, everybody. Thank you also my team members, Dina, Zeynep, and Megan. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, for the rest of the team that contributed in their own way. They shared this event with their own network. That was a fantastic support. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time to support internationals. Yes, of course. You managed to explain something that I have asked both my GP and my insurance, and no one could explain it in the way I understood. That's music to my ears, Jakub. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening. Take good care of yourself. And I'm here. I will share the recording tomorrow. Tonight it's too late, but I'm going to share it with everybody. I will also upload it on the YouTube channel so that you can watch it at any time you want. And of course, make sure that you can book a call and you can ask all extra questions you might have. Take good care of yourself. Have a nice evening.